Shalom. First and foremost, call halal yamla, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Harakak Radash. Double honor to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone that I learned this truth from. And also peace and salutation to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And pretty much in this video, I'm going to be going into the situation, dealing with the Doomsday Clock. As that's been one of the main things that's been trending throughout the internet, all day, throughout today. Okay, as you see here on the screen from Google, it says scientists move Doomsday Clock closer to midnight than ever before. All right, and as you can pretty much see through these articles that came up. Okay, pretty much now these scientists are saying that the Doomsday Clock is at 85 seconds to midnight. All right, and I pretty much did a little bit of research on what exactly is the Doomsday Clock. Okay, because that's it's one of the things that's been trending ultimately for years. Okay, throughout Babylon the Great America and throughout the world. Okay, so I did a little bit of research on it myself, just to kind of get a little bit more insight on what exactly is the Doomsday Clock and what is it all about. All right, and as you can see from the from here on the screen, one of the pretty much trending question that people ask in regards to the Doomsday Clock, as you can see on the screen, it says, what happens if the Doomsday Clock reaches midnight? All right, and this is one of the drop tabs that that came up. And so as it says, Google AI overview, it says when the Doomsday Clock hits midnight, it symbolizes that humanity has failed to avert a catastrophic self-inflicted global disaster such as nuclear war, climate collapse, or a pandemic, rendering Earth largely uninhabitable. Okay, it says it's a metaphorical warning, not a prediction of a precise event, but a marker of civilization's end as we know it. Says the bulletin of the atomic scientist, which maintains the clock, hopes it never reaches midnight, as it signifies irreversible damage from existential threats like nuclear weapons, climate change, and disruptive technologies. All right, and then it goes into what midnight represents, and then it says bullet point number 1. It says end of civilization. Midnight means humanity has made Earth unlivable, marking the end of civilization as we know it. And of course, we, the hopeful elect, we know that according to the Bible that that there's never going to be an end to humanity or the earth itself or civilization. Okay, the whole concept of the end of the world in regards to the end of humanity and the end of the earth and all these things, that's ultimately a concept that was made up by Esau Edom to further forward his lies and his pseudoscience. Okay, his witchcraft, thinking that ultimately, because when these Edomites push the whole narrative of the end of the world, ultimately we know, we the hopeful elect, we know that according to the scriptures, all right, as it says in Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 4, all right, Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament 1 verse 4, it says, one generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. You see that? So the Lord has it ordained for this earth that He created before the foundation of the heaven and the earth. All right, in the beginning, through Yahweh Shai and Alahayim, the Lord ordained for this vessel called the earth to abide forever. Okay, to exist, forever and ever and ever. All right, and ultimately for his begotten Son Yahweh Shai, and the first fruit spirits of the elect of the nation of Israel, to rule over the earth forever and ever and ever. And ultimately that's going to come to pass in the kingdom when Yahweh Shai returns. All right, but the Lord ordained for the planet Earth itself to abide forever. And so with understanding that, ultimately when these Edomites, you have these Edomite scientists, or even certain Edomite Christians, when they talk about the end of the world and this, that, and the third, ultimately, according to the scriptures, the world that's going to end very soon when Yahushua comes back is going to be Esau's world. All right, not the end of the world as in the end of humanity or the end of the planet Earth itself. No, we're in the end of Esau's world, as it says in 2nd Ezra chapter 6, and I'm going to start at verse 7. It says, "Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth?" All right, verse 8. "And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau." All right, verse 9. "For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth." You see that? So when you have these Edomites, talking about the end of the world and this, that, and the third, okay, ultimately, according to the scriptures, it's not going to be the end of humanity or the end of so-called civilization or the end of the earth itself. No, it's only going to be the end of Esau's world, Esau's kingdom, Esau's rulership, Esau's blessing. Okay, because after that, the next world is going to, come into power after that, which is what? Jacob's world, okay, the kingdom of heaven, all right, which is going to be ruled by Yahweh Shai and 144,000 elect men of the nation of Israel. Lord wouldn't I be of that number, okay, and after that, of course, you have the large multitude, men, women, and children of the nation of Israel that are also of the elect, the 1/3, okay, and then after that, ultimately all Israel is going to be blessed, all right, in being the kingdom. All right, on top of all the heathen nations, right, ruling, okay, but it's going to be Yahweh Shai and the 144K that's going to be at the forefront of our rulership, all right, the throne of David, all right, but the end of the world is just simply going to be the end of Esau's world, all right, which is going to mark the beginning of Jacob's world, the kingdom of heaven, which is going to be an eternal, everlasting world, all right, an everlasting kingdom. See that? Under Yahweh Shai. And so, going back to this, Google, it says irreversible catastrophe. It's all right. It says it signifies humanity's failure to manage major threats, leading to potential nuclear annihilation. Okay, which again, we just read that the earth abided forever. Okay, so we know that nuclear missiles are going to be used in World War III. All right, but it's not going to destroy the whole earth itself. No, only certain parts of the earth, namely that of America, Babylon the Great. Okay, as well as the current land of Israel. All right, but the only difference is that the land of Israel is actually going to be built back up in the kingdom. All right, because that's where we as Israelites under Yahweh Shai are going to rule at, okay, as the headquarters of the kingdom of heaven. All right, but America, Babylon the Great, the Lord's going to leave this place, totally desolate, forever and ever and ever in the all right, in the kingdom, the next world to come. It says a runaway climate crisis or technologically induced societal collapse. Says the clock's purpose. It says metaphor, not prediction. It's a symbolic gauge, not a literal forecast. Okay, it says it's a symbolic gauge, not a literal forecast, created by scientists to warn about dangers from nuclear weapons, and later expanded to include climate change and other threats. Okay, So, matter of fact, I'll read it again. It says, metaphor, not prediction. It's a symbolic gauge, not a literal forecast, created by scientists, all right, Esau's scientists, to warn about dangers from nuclear weapons, and later expanded to include climate change and other threats. All right, and ultimately, as these scientists are using this, this metaphoric doomsday clock. Okay, because pretty much, what is the purpose of this? Altogether, in this, looking at it from a spiritual angle, ultimately, is these Edomite scientists, setting themselves up to be prophets on the left hand side. Okay, using this metaphoric doomsday clock to prophesy and forewarn of dangers and nuclear threats and cyber attacks and different dangers coming to the earth in the near future. And ultimately, okay, the real forewarners of all these things coming down the pipe, all right, all these dangers and perilous times and nuclear threats and things like that, ultimately it's the prophets of Yahweh Shema Shai that's warned about these things since before the foundation of the heaven and the earth. Okay, which, let's get Jeremiah 28 in verse 8. It says, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. See that? So the prophets, the prophets of Yahweh Shema Shai, since the days of old, all right, and ultimately before the foundation of the heaven and the earth, prophesied about all these things that's coming down the pipe within Esau's so-called doomsday clock. Okay, evils, pestilence, war, fire coming to the earth. All right, the end of this current age. Esau's world. All right, civil war, civil unrest, all our chaos. Sedition. Economic collapse. The prophets since the days of old have prophesied and warned about all these things. All right, not Esau's scientists or his left hand priesthood or his left hand, these left hand individuals that Esau puts before people's faces, acting as if they're forewarning about all these things that we see going on in the world. No, it's the prophets and the men of the Lord that has always warned about these times that we're in right now. Okay. It says call to action. The clock's movement towards midnight urges leaders and the public to take immediate action to reverse dangerous trends. Okay, you got Esau and these heathen and their leaders, scrambling around to ultimately to try to upset the prophecies of Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, because mind you, all these things that these Edomite scientists are warning about within the so-called doomsday clock, right? Nuclear war, different calamities, pestilence, all right, different events taking place throughout the earth, catastrophic events, all right. All these things are all results of prophecies. All these things are all results of the prophecies of Yahweh Shema Shai coming to pass. Okay, these are the words of Yahweh Shema Shai coming to pass. Okay, great evils, great pestilence, plagues, tribulation, all these things going on the earth. All right, and of course we, the hopeful elect, we don't need no doomsday clock or anything that Esau has set up to to let us know how close we are to the day of Yahweh Shai returning, because ultimately we have prophecy to to let us know that we're close and to the return of Yahweh Shai. That the day of Yahweh Shai is nigh unto us. Okay, because as scripture says in 2nd Ezra 9 in verse 1, it says, he answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou seest part of the signs pass, which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. See that? So we measured the time diligently in itself. And of course, how do we, the hopeful elect, the men of the Lord, measure the signs of the times? By tapping into the prophecies of the scriptures. Okay, tapping into the words of Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai. All right. As a matter of fact, just to further touch upon one bullet point that we read earlier, all right, where it says right here, end of civilization. Okay, because again, that's a major narrative, in fear mongering talking point that Esau likes to push to the public. Okay, that pretty much when his society and his system ultimately fails and collapses and gets taken down, then ultimately the whole world is going to collapse right along with them. Okay, because that's the a major part of the witchcraft that Esau has pushed throughout the earth. And of course, through his industrial revolutions, right, creating all these different inventions to make things in everyday life more easier and more convenient. Okay, to where people, the average person is more dependent on Esau and his pseudoscience and his technology and his machinery more than learning how to live off the earth, right? Work the land, and ultimately, depending on Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai for their food and their water and their shelter and their principal things of life. You see that? Esau has pretty much made this world, so comfortable and so convenient to where, when his system collapses, okay, he's gonna have everybody within his whole system thinking that they're gonna be through, basically. Okay, because the average person, especially here in the West, okay, America or the NATO or the EU countries, wherever Esau lives at, right? Esau deems the regions where he rules at as so-called first world countries, right? So-called developed countries where everyday things in life are done more efficiently and made more convenient and easier, right? But the main thing, convenience, right? So when all these things that Esau has set up in the earth to make things more convenient on the average person pretty much gets destroyed or done away with, it's going to have a lot of people bugging out. Okay, because it's going to take a lot of people out of their comfort zone, right? People are going to be perplexed, as Yahushua spoke of in Luke the 21st chapter. The stress of nations with perplexity, right? That's Luke 21 verse, around about the 25th verse, where Yahushua spoke about that, right? People are going to be without food. They're going to be, without resources, not knowing which way to turn, right? And people are going to be on their knees begging for, ultimately for the MOTB, the micro C, to have some form of comfort or convenience or luxury, back at their, back in their, back within their possession, so to speak, right? And so, as it says right here, where I have highlighted, it says end of civilization. It says midnight. Okay, the midnight on the so-called Doomsday Clock, right, means humanity has made Earth unlivable, marking the end of civilization as we know it. And we know, according to the scriptures, all right, see Isaiah 45 and 18, it says, "For thus saith the Lord Yahweh that created the heavens, Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai himself that formed the earth and made it," okay, through Yahweh Shai and Al-Hayim in the beginning, right? And it says, "He hath established it, he created it not in vain." All right, the Lord didn't create the earth in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. See that? So the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai created the earth to be inhabited. Hence why on the earth we have, all different manner of trees and fruits and vegetables, herbs, different smells. Okay, you have water throughout the earth. okay, animals, okay. You have medicines that naturally come out of the earth. All right, everything that mankind would need to live and survive comes, directly out of the earth. All right, and that's not done by coincidence or accident. No, the Lord, does, designed the earth, okay, to be a, perfect habitat for mankind as well as animals, right? Bugs, insects, fishes, sea creatures, the fowls in the air, right? When you're looking into the different dynamics of how the earth operates and how nature operates, okay, you can clearly see that number one, everything that's in the earth and in the heavens was all created by an intelligent designer, right? A higher power, Yahweh Shema Shai, okay? And the Lord obviously created it to be inhabited, okay? Hence why, again, you see all, different manner of trees and fruits and animals and, herbs and vegetables, right? Waters, okay? Different, types of terrain. You have flat terrains, okay? Rocky terrains, mountains, see that? Islands, beaches, okay? The Lord clearly created this earth to be a literal paradise, you see, inhabited, okay, for mankind to be able to be fruitful and to multiply. You see that? But under Esau's rule, as the earth has grown more and more weaker through age, especially under Esau's rule, okay, this earth is slowly but surely becoming more uninhabitable as Esau's going around, cutting down trees, right? Drilling oil out of the grounds in different regions of the earth, okay, sucking the resources out of the earth, polluting the air, polluting the water, okay, polluting the seeds and the crops and the vegetables, destroying the animals, right? And as this verse reads in the NLT, Isaiah 45 verse 18, in the NLT it says, "For the Lord Yahweh is the Most High Power, and He created the heavens and earth, and put everything in place." Okay, everything that mankind would need on the earth, the Lord put it all in its place. Okay, resources, fruits, vegetables, herbs, water, trees, plants, you name it. Okay, the Lord put everything in the earth in its place, in its proper order. All right, in its natural order that the Lord intended it to be. Right, and it says He made the world to be lived in. Okay, He made the world to be lived in, not to be a place of empty chaos. I am the Lord Yahweh, He says, and there is no other. You see that? So the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai did not create the earth to be a place of just empty chaos. And you see, that's how Esau, Edom, and these heathen have ruled throughout the earth. Primarily that of Esau, Edom. Okay? Going throughout the earth, constantly drilling oil. All right? Polluting the waters, polluting the air. All right? And even these devils are even going as far as even trying to block out the sun. Okay? These Edomites and these heathen and their elites are even going as far as trying to block out the sun. All right? And creating an artificial sun. Literally trying to recreate the Lord's creation by their own left-hand carnal satanic means. See that? And hey, that's all that it all speaks to why more and more why the Esau and these heathen, okay, they don't need salvation. They don't need to be saved. They need to be stopped. Okay, or else what? If Yahweh Shema Shai wasn't shortening up these days, all right, under the rulership of these heathen, pretty much by the time Yahweh Shai comes back, there will be no flesh left to be saved. Okay, especially of the elect. That's why we, the hopeful elect, the remnant of the nation of Israel, we sigh and cry to Yahweh Shema Shai more than ever. Okay, harder than ever, to come deliver us out of this madness and this chaotic environment, all right, that Esau and these heathen have set up throughout the earth. That's pretty much made, all right, this earth pretty much unlivable. All right, you hardly can't enjoy anything under Esau's rulership. You don't have fresh air. All right, you walk outside, everything stinks. Okay, you hardly smell trees and fruits and different fragrances that the Lord created out of the earth. Okay, you can't hardly find any natural bodies of water that have clean drinking water, right? The air is all polluted, the food is all defiled and polluted, right? The whole entire earth is defiled under the Esau and these heathen. Okay, it's turned into an empty place of chaos. All right, and, and if that's not enough in itself, you look at the way Esau operates. He even goes around the earth using things of the earth as basically his science experiment. Okay, snatching up animals left and right, using them as lab rats. Sticking the charagma and different jabs inside of animals and testing them out, right? Going throughout the earth, blowing shit up. Okay, testing out different types of weapons and bombs and nuclear bombs throughout the earth. Okay, blowing things up. All right, Esau and these heathen have pretty much created this earth to be an empty place of chaos. Okay, whereas the Lord created this earth to be livable. Okay, a paradise. All right, and under the rulership of Esau, Edom, and these heathen nations, this earth is anything but a paradise. Which is why, as it speaks of in Romans the 8th chapter, it talks about how the whole creation groaneth even to this day. For the sons of God to be made manifest. Roughly paraphrasing it. Okay, this earth itself is crying out daily for the Son of the Most High God Yahweh and the sons of the Most High God Yahweh, which is the Israelites, starting with the 144,000 first fruits, to rule over the earth again. All right, to restore this earth from chaos back to paradise again, Eden. You see that? So going back to Google, okay. Let's see, y'all. I'll go right here. All right. It says key threats considered. It says nuclear risk. So like it says, nuclear risk, proliferation of nuclear weapons, and increased tensions between nuclear armed states. Okay, so like let me read this part again. Let me read up above it. All right. It says call to action. The clock's movement towards midnight urges leaders and the public to take immediate action to reverse dangerous trends. Okay, so this whole so-called Doomsday Clock has a lot of these leaders, these heathen and their leaders, and the general public itself. Okay, being called to take action. All right, immediate action, as it said. Okay, to reverse dangerous trends. Okay, to reverse the dangers that's coming to this earth, which is ultimately what? The different judgments and plagues of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, because real quick, all right, according to the scriptures, all right, according to prophecy, all right, all these dangers that are coming down the pipe, okay, you cannot reverse them. You can't reverse the word of Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, like the scriptures even says in Isaiah 55, pretty much the word of the Lord doesn't come back unto him void, but instead what is going to accomplish everything that he said it for to do, roughly paraphrasing it. But this is second Ezra 16, and I'm gonna start from the top. It says, woe be unto thee, Babylon and Asia, woe be unto thee, Egypt and Syria. Okay, and ultimately woe to the world, like it as it says in the previous chapter in the 14th verse. Second Ezra 15 verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein. Right? But it says second Ezra 16 verse 2. Gird up yourselves with cloths of sack and hair. Bewail your children and be sorry, for your destruction is at hand. All right. Verse 3. A sword is sent unto you, and who may turn it back? A fire is sent among you, and who may quench it? Verse 5. Plagues are sent unto you, And what is he that may drive them away? Okay, so when the Lord sends these different judgments and these different plagues and destruction, right? These catastrophic events, okay, who is he that may drive them back? Okay, who is he that can make the word of the Lord come back unto him void? Okay, who is he that can upset, the words and the prophecies and the judgments of Yahweh Shema Shai? And there's nobody. Okay, so when it's said right here in the right here, all right, on the call to action that we just read, it says the clock's movement towards midnight urges leaders and the public to take immediate action to reverse dangerous trends. Hey, the point is that there's no leader or anybody in this world that can reverse the dangerous trends that's being sent into the earth from Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, because like we just read in 2 Ezra 16 and verse 5 again, plagues are sent unto you, okay, from Yahweh Shema Shai, and what is he that may drive them away? Okay, who can drive away the plagues sent on the earth from Yahweh Shema Shai? Okay, that's absolutely nobody, no leader, all right, no person, whether they be Jake, Esau, heathen, right? Regardless of their beliefs or whatever whatever they're into, right? When the Lord sends his judgments, okay, nobody or no thing can send them back unto him void. All right, point blank, period. Okay. It says nuclear risk. It says proliferation of nuclear weapons and increased tensions between nuclear arms states. Okay, so the Doomsday Clock, one of the main warnings of the so-called Doomsday Clock is it also warns of basically nuclear war. Okay, nuclear weapons being used in World War III. Okay, which that's also scriptural as well. Okay, matter of fact, let's get a couple of scriptures to prove it. All right, Isaiah 9 verse 5, it says, For every battle of the warrior is with matter of fact, before I read that, let's get Revelation 11. What is it, 14? Yep. Revelation 11 and verse 14, it says, the second woe was past. Okay. What is the second woe? All right. Or rather, what is the first and second woe? Okay. The first woe being World War I. The second woe being World War II. All right. Because mind you, in the Bible, the word woe means destruction or calamity or ruin. All right. So as it says again, Revelation 11 verse 14, the second woe, all right, the second world war, the second calamity, the second destruction is past. Okay. And it says, and behold, the third woe, all right, the third war's war, World War III, also known as the Battle of Armageddon in the book of Revelation, cometh quickly. Okay. So the third woe, World War III, as the scripture says in the book of Revelation, cometh quickly. Okay, so World War III is right around the corner. All right, and then World War III is right around the corner. That also means what? That the MOTB is right around the corner, because we know that the MOTB has to be rolled out before before World War III pops off, and ultimately before the nuclear missiles get shot off, right? And if the MOTB, which is the micro C, is right around the corner, then that means what? That Jacob's trouble has to come even quickly. Which right now, we're pretty much in Jacob's trouble. All right, the beginning stages of Jacob's trouble. Okay, the great tribulation that Yahushua spoke of in the Gospels. All right, but it said the third woe, World War III, cometh quickly. Okay, and as it says in Isaiah 9 verse 5, how is World War III, all right, the third woe, going to be fought? All right, Isaiah 9 verse 5. It says, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood. Okay, wars in past times were fought, up close and personal, hand to hand, right, with swords, okay, shields, bucklers, helmets, right, confused noise, grunting noises, Okay, the neighing of horses, right? But it says, but this, okay, this what? This war, this third woe, right? It says, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. See that? So this upcoming war, World War III, is going to be with burning and fuel of fire. All right, which is what? Ultimately, nuclear fire. Okay, thermonuclear fire, hypersonic nuclear missiles. See that? Nuclear warheads. That's going to be the main weapon of this upcoming war, World War III. All right, and just to go into the scriptures, all right, going back to 2nd Ezra 16, to prove that nuclear missiles are spoken about in the scriptures, all right, just to get one scripture amongst various scriptures we can go to, but let's get this right here in 2nd Ezra 16, and I could pretty much read all of this, but I'm gonna just go straight to the point, for time's sake. So 2nd Ezra 16, and I start at verse 12. It says, "The earth quaketh, and the foundations thereof; the sea ariseth up with waves from the deep, and the waves of it are troubled, and the fishes thereof also before the Lord, and before the glory of his power." All right. It says, verse 13, "For strong is his right hand that bendeth the bow; his arrows that he shooteth are sharp, and shall not miss, when they begin to be shot into the ends of the world." Now you gotta ask yourself, what type of bow and arrow can somebody shoot from one end of the world, all right, or one end of the earth, and make it land all the way to the opposite end of the earth? Okay, what type of bow and arrow can somebody physically shoot that can do that? Okay, and the answer is none. Okay, nobody on the earth, regardless of how strong they may be or how skilled they may be with the bow and arrow, okay, nobody can physically shoot a bow and arrow from one end of the earth and make it land to the opposite end of the earth. Okay, so therefore what? These arrows and these bows and these arrows that the Lord is speaking of right here in 2nd Ezra 16 verse 13, it has to be talking about nuclear missiles. Okay, hypersonic nuclear missiles, ICBM nuclear missiles. All right, because after all, what does ICBM stand for? All right, intercontinental ballistic missile. Okay, intercontinental means what? Between continents. Okay, from one continent to the other. From Russia to America, so-called North America, from Europe to Russia, or from Europe to North America, right? From India to America, or India to Europe, right? Intercontinental ballistic missiles. See that? So these are the arrows that we're reading of right here in this verse that the Lord is going to shoot, okay, from one end of the earth to the other. All right. And it says, verse 14, "Behold, the plagues are sent, and shall not return again, until they come upon the earth." Verse 15, "The fire is kindled, and shall not be put out, till it consume the foundation of the earth." You see that? And that's what that nuclear fire is going to do upon America. Okay, it's not going to be put out until it consumes this place fully. All right. To where, all these buildings and skyscrapers and all these streets and bridges and roads here in America is all going to be burnt up. Okay, every blade of grass in this place is all going to be burnt up. Okay, it's going to be turned into a lake of fire, and it's going to be made of utter desolation. Okay, to where the only thing that's going to be dwelling in this country after the Lord judges it, right, is going to be, unclean birds and unclean fowls, vultures, right? And different desert creatures to pretty much consume and eat up all the dead bodies that's going to be left in this place after the smoke clears up. All right, after the nuclear destruction of America, right? And it says, verse 16, 2nd Ezra 16 verse 16, "Like as an arrow which is shot of a mighty archer returneth not backward, even so the plagues even so the plagues that shall be sent upon earth shall not return. You see that? So when those arrows, all right, those missiles are going to be shot off, they're not going to return. Okay? Because when the Lord puts a spirit on, Putin and Kim Jong Un and Xi Jinping and these different leaders of these heathen nations that are hostile against America, when the Lord puts a spirit on their leaders to shoot off their nuclear weapons and their nuclear missiles and their hypersonic missiles, okay, they're not going to return back to their silos, okay, but instead what? They're going to be bathed in heaven, like the Lord says in Isaiah 34, right? And they're going to come down upon Idumea, all right, via what? Babylon the Great America, which is ruled by the biblical Edomites, and as well as going to come down upon the current land of Israel, which is also ruled by Edomites, okay, namely that of Amalek, all right, the small hats. You see that? So this all shows, okay, and mind you that, there's other scriptures we can go to as well to prove that nuclear missiles are biblical, all right, but right here, what I just read in 2 Corinthians 16, speaks of, okay, nuclear missiles, hypersonic missiles, all right, nuclear warheads, ICBM missiles, all right, and so as this, so-called doomsday clock, as it says right here where I have highlighted, okay, nuclear risk, it says proliferation of nuclear weapons and increased tensions between nuclear armed states, all right, and hey, we see that going on right now, okay, tensions between, heavily nuclear armed states, such as tension between Russia and the United States, okay, all right, the China and the United States, North Korea and the United States, India and Pakistan versus the West, okay, even conflict between intentions between, currently right now the United States and Iran, which we know, all right, the small hats are ultimately going to get the United States to strike Iran, all right, and when that happens, that's when we know, all right, that World War III is going to pop off because Russia is going to get involved, then China is going to get involved to aid Iran, right, to come up against America and the small hats, and like as the scriptures even speaks of in Jeremiah, which we always bring out, talks about the least of the flock shall draw Babylon the Great out into war. Okay, the least of the flock being who? The small hats, Amalek. Okay, is who's going to draw the United States into war with Iran, which is going to pop off World War III. Okay, it's going to get Russia involved, China, right, and all these different nations that are hostile against America and hostile against the West. Okay, and it's going to be an all-out nuclear war. See that? And then it says right here, climate change, the whole climate thing, right? It says disruptive technologies. It says risk from AI, biotechnology, and cyber warfare. And of course, biotechnology, as you have the elites of Esau, Edom, and those that rub elbows with them, talking about hacking into humans, surveilling under the skin, right? You hear talking points like that from the mouth of this guy Noah Yuval Harari, right? Talking about humans are hackable animals and hacking under the skin and surveilling under the skin, right? And of course, what type of technology that Esau has in the earth right now that can that can go inside of people's skin, all right, their right hands or their foreheads, all right, the microchip, which is the MOTB. See that? So that's all in line with prophecy as well. Okay, disruptive technologies, risk from AI, right? As pretty much very soon Esau is going to upgrade all this AI that he's setting up in the earth to pretty much be autonomous, to where AI will be able to make decisions on its own without human aid or human control, right? It'll be able to make decisions on its own, right? Figure out things on its own, okay? And it says risk from AI, biotechnology, okay, and cyber warfare, all right? Then it also says bio threats, It says the potential for engineered pandemics. You see that? Engineered pandemics. And of course, engineered by who? Esau, Edom, and these heathen nations and their elites. Okay? Because we know, all right, the elites of Esau, Edom need chaos, okay, to justify coming with their left hand order. And of course, part of the chaos that the elites need is not only civil war and civil unrest and all out anarchy, but also, man-made, all right, diseases, okay, man-made demics, right, man-made pestilence. You see that? To justify locking everything down again, like we saw back in 2020, shutting everything down, okay, issuing forth, more, unrighteous decrees, and using different plagues and crises to justify taking away constitutional rights and taking away people's rights to be able to leave their houses and go outside and basically be human, right? Bio threats. So this so-called Doomsday Clock also warns of bio threats. Okay, engineered demics. Okay, like what we saw back in 2020 and 2021 with the whole, C ragamuffin, right? The C ragamuffin 19. Okay, and hey, even Yahushua himself even warned of, okay, diseases will be a major aspect of end time prophecy. Okay, this is Matthew 24, and I'm gonna start at verse 6. This Yahushua is speaking. He says, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars." Right? And do we not see that going on the earth today? Tension between, these BRICS nations versus the Western nations, and hell, even tensions and divisions within the West. Okay, division within NATO, division within the EU. These NATO and EU countries pretty much looking at America with the side eye, right? Looking at the small hats with the side eye, right? It says, he says, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of war. See that ye be not troubled." Okay? For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. All right? Verse 7, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there should be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." Different weather effects, right? Floodings, okay, and even right now, currently, the majority of the United States is under a winter storm, where majority of states in the United States are facing, historic cold winter weathers and snowstorms and things like that. Okay, these are all part of end time prophecy, as Yahushua is speaking of. Okay, earthquakes in diverse places, floodings, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanic eruptions, right? And he also speaks of famine and as well pestilences. What is pestilences? All right.
Strong's G 3061. Loimas. Loimas.
Pestilence says a pestilent fellow, pest, plague. Okay. Then the Strong's definition, it says a plague, literally the disease. See that? Literally the disease. See that? So even Yahushua spoke of diseases, right, and pestilence being one of the major things that will be going on in the earth in the end time before his return. See that? And mind you, okay, since the C19 back in 2020, okay, Esau's been talking about more mutated diseases coming off the C19, right? I remember at one time Esau was talking about the so-called Omicron virus or whatever. Okay, this disease and that disease, right? And then you even had the whole bird flu thing going on about a couple years back, right? That was supposedly killing all kinds of animals and cattle, right? which, hey, we know in the book of Exodus, the Lord sent a cattle plague in ancient Egypt in the book of Exodus, right? That was one of the other plagues that came upon ancient Egypt, all right? And that's the Lord said in Second Ezra 15, He will smite Egypt with plagues as before. Okay, talking about this modern day Egypt, America, Babylon the Great. Okay, so plagues, right? Pestilences, diseases. Okay, and even right now, you even have certain of the elites of Esau, Edom, right? Talking about another upcoming disease that has no cure, for it, or any jabs that can cure it. Okay, so look for that coming down the pipe. I believe they call it disease X, if I'm not mistaken. All right, but we know ultimately, okay, the Lord is using the left hand to make all these things come to pass. Okay, for the purpose of number one, judgment. All right, and ultimately for the purpose of prophecy coming to pass. See that? Prophecy coming to pass to lead up to the return of His begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. All right. Esau with this whole, doomsday clock, thing going on. This is basically, these Edomites and their scientists basically present themselves as prophets on the left hand side. Okay, forewarning of the different things and different catastrophic events and plagues and, pestilences that they're ultimately orchestrating on the left hand side. Okay, to justify, pretty much shutting things down, doing away with the old way of how the world works, and setting up a new system, which is ultimately what? The NWO agenda. All right, governed by AI, technocrats. Okay, Esau, all these different issues and things that's going on in the world. Esau's going to present AI and technology as the solution to to pretty much all the world's problems, right? As peace and safety, as it speaks of in 1 Thessalonians 5. But we know when Esau speaks peace and safety, right? As it says in 1 Thessalonians 5. Matter of fact, let's get it. Okay. 1 Thessalonians 5. This is the Apostle Paul speaking about the day of the Lord, right? 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 3, he says, for when they shall say peace and safety, right, via what? AI, pseudoscience, technology, the NWO, right, the MOTB, which is the micro CHIP. Okay, when Esau is going to say peace and safety, it says, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Okay, so sudden destruction is going to follow behind Esau's left hand peace and safety. Okay, diseases, pestilences. Okay, all out anarchy. Okay, confusion everywhere. Right, and then of course we know the ultimate destruction is going to follow after Esau's peace and safety. Right, his NWO agenda, the rolling out of the MOTB. Right, we know that the ultimate destruction is going to follow after that is what? The missiles. Okay, nuclear destruction. All right, and so yeah, so this doomsday clock thing that Esau has going on the left hand side. All right, again, this is nothing but Esau trying to set himself up as a prophet on the left hand side through his scientists and his technology. Okay, but again, as we read earlier in Jeremiah 28:8, the prophets of Yahweh Shemashai spoke of all these things since before the foundation of the heaven and earth. All right, of war, of famine, pestilence, right, against great countries and against great kingdoms, right. The end of Esau's world and the beginning of Jacob's world, which is the kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. All right, and also, let me get this. I think I might end it off on this. This is Second Ezra chapter 7 and verse 43. It says, but the day of doom shall be the end of this time. Okay, the end of what time? The end of Esau's time. The end of Esau's world, right? the day of doom, which is ultimately what? All right, World War III, nuclear destruction, nuclear missiles, right? And as well the return of Yahushua with the holy angels via the chariots to bring the fire of their own as well. Okay, those laser beams that's going to Yahushua and the angels going to be shooting out of the mouth of the chariots to further aid in the destruction of Babylon the Great America, right? Turn this place to a lake of fire. It says again, 2nd Ezra 7:43, but the day of doom shall be the end of this time. All right, and mind you as well, when you go into the etymology of the word doom on the etymon line, the word doom basically means judgment. Okay, when you go into it, right? So the day of doom, the day of judgment, shall be the end of this time, the end of Esau's time. It says, and the beginning of the immortality for to come, which is what? Jacob's world, okay, the kingdom of heaven, wherein corruption is past. See that? Because hey, when Yahushua comes back to establish Jacob's world, the kingdom of heaven, throne of David, hey, we the hopeful elect, Lord will not be of the number of the nation of Israel. We're going to be the first fruits to enter into the new bodies, the immortal, indestructible, incorruptible bodies, and be entered into the new covenant, all right, and be joint heirs with Yahushua's rulership forever and ever, okay, be immortals under Yahushua, all right, where corruption is past, where the former things are passed away, as it speaks of in Revelation, right, and it's all going to follow up after the end of Esau's world. When the end of Esau's world is going to be marked with doom, judgment, destruction, okay, nuclear destruction, right? And so so with that, Lord willing, this video is edifying, and until next time, shalom.